We're so excited to continue this community conversation series. A couple of weeks ago, we did a conversation with Eugene Moy from the Chinatown area, who talked about why he loved Chinatown, and he walked us through the past, present, and future of Chinatown. So we continued this series of community conversations through a different path with Miya Iwataki, who will talk about the spirit of the 60s and 70s, a snapshot of Asian American movement. So the purpose of the reason why we're doing these community conversations, because we see the importance of being engaged with these communities, especially during this time where we may not be able to as much because of the pandemic. And so we hope you find this interesting, something you learn different when you leave this meeting, and that you'll be engaged throughout the process. So as I mentioned, we're very excited to have this. Imagine you getting off the bus or train into Little Tokyo, and you're walking and you run into Miya and you ask her a question just about her story and about activism in the community. So Metros will do less of the talking, and we're really providing that platform so Miya to talk and for all of you to be engaged. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Christina, who will talk about housekeeping items, and then turn over to Jean Marie, my colleague, who will introduce Miya. So Christina?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Christina. So just quick housekeeping items. We are recording this meeting, and it's going to be emailed out to everyone that registered via Eventbrite, which hopefully you all did, probably. And then whether you're joining by computer or by the phone only, you are muted. We will unmute folks at the end afterwards, after Miya's presentation, if you would like to speak. And then, as I mentioned, there will be time to ask her questions afterwards. And then nothing in this presentation can be reproduced or disseminated without written permission from Miya. So during Q&A, after Miya's presentation, there's a raise your hand button that you should see at the bottom of your screen. And that's when you click that, I'll be able to see that you're in our speaker queue, and I'll unmute you one by one and announce your name. If you are joining by the phone only, you can email me at Harrington, HARRIN as in Nancy, GTON as in Nancy, C as in cat, at metro.net, or text me at 213-326-1787, and just let me know you'd like to speak and give me the last 4 digits of your phone number. Now, if you have any technical difficulties throughout Miya's presentation, you can contact Michael at 213-804-9935. And I'll hand it over to Jean Marie. Right after I unmute her. Sorry, Jean Marie. There you are.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jean Marie. It's my pleasure to introduce Miya. If you haven't met her, I can tell you she's a writer and a longtime activist. But it is in the aspect of storytelling of her experiences during the 60s and 70s social unrest that resonates remarkably in a palpable form. The first time I heard her speak to Little Tokyo's activism was at the Japanese American National Museum, and this was some years ago. It answered a question that those of us at Metro, like Michael Cortez and Christina Harrington, who bring us together today, were trying to understand. Why is it Little Tokyo's leadership is able to protect its cultural integrity through the landslide pressures of time? And what do we need to know of that history that will allow us to meet their values while building the regional connector? Those 11 minutes at Janum left a visceral and lasting impression of strength, of leadership in response to injustice. As you watch over the next few minutes, you will see Miya on the front porch of her apartment in Boyle Heights, and later with groups of friends and fellow activists like Bill Watanabe, who established what became the Little Tokyo Service Center. She'll share what prompted this activism. Miya will then bring us back to present day's divisive times and the connection to injustices of today. What she most wants to hear from you as we move forward to the comment period is, what is your response to today's turmoil? What do the young leaders on the line want to say or ask?
Thank you, Jean-Marie. Thank you for inviting me here to share my perspective on Little Tokyo. And I want to make it clear, this is my perspective, which I think a lot of people share, but it is a personal experience. It was the 60s and 70s, a vibrant era of movement and revolution. Martin Luther King had a dream. Malcolm X had a message to the grassroots. It was the age of protest. Women burned bras, young men burned draft cards, anti-war protesters burned the flag, and the inner cities burned in rebellion. It was the age of Aquarius. Hippies turned on, tuned in, dropped out, wandering through Woodstock in a purple haze of crystal blue persuasion. It was the era of social change, where a people's movement mobilized and marched against racism, leading the fight to win civil rights in 1964. It was the age of liberation. Women stood up, spoke out, took back the night, appropriated our bodies and ourselves, searing our way into history and sisterhood. This was an era of great heights. JFK asked not what our country could do for us, but what we could do for our country. And Neil Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon while the whole world watched. And the whole world watched as 23,000 Chicago police rioted against protesters at the 1968 Democratic National Convention, and watched again at Kent State in May 1970 as National Guards opened fire, killing 4 unarmed student protesters. And we marched. It was an era of assassinations. President John F. Kennedy, November 22, 1964, motorcade, Dallas, Texas. Malcolm X, February 21, 1965, the Audubon Ballroom, New York. Bobby Kennedy, June 6, 1968, the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. And Reverend Martin Luther King, April 4, 1968, the Lorraine Hotel, Memphis, Tennessee. And we marched. It was an age of revolution and third world struggles, and armies of freedom fighters rising from poverty to liberate their people. And we marched. And there was a war in Vietnam when a small Asian country stood up to the most powerful nation in the world, and the long-haired army in Vietnam inspired women all over with their courage and commitment in a war that reshaped the culture of America, and we marched. Communities of color reclaimed their history and contributions to this country omitted from history books, creating a positive cultural identity, defining themselves as who they wanted to be, who they deserved to be, and who they had earned the right to be, standing up for their rights. The Civil Rights Movement had led to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Congress of Racial Equality. The Black Panther Party brought power to the people. The Panthers inspired the Chicano movement and the Brown Berets. The American Indian movement rose up and gave new voice to the indigenous people. The Young Lords Party, based in New York, spoke for Puerto Ricanos. Long ignored Mexican and Filipino farm workers mobilized under the banner of Huelga and the leadership of Cesar Chavez and Filipino leader Larry Itliong and won national support for the Great Boycott and the rights of farm workers. Where were we? We, the invisible minority. We, the checkbox marked other. We, the quiet Americans. We, the gardeners, housekeepers, farmers, sewing workers. We, gentle geishas. We, sexy Susie Wongs. We, hard workers pulling up our bootstraps. We, Orientals in the eyes of Occidentals. We, the model minority. We were ready to move on. And Are You Yellow Conference talked about defining our own identity. Students were hungry for this. Oriental Concern chapters sprang up in campuses throughout California and across the United States. Rich discussions, dissertations, books were written. But there were issues, political issues and unmet needs outside of campus. This is how I got into the movement. One night in the mid-60s, in the back room of Ben Yano's bar, the Alibi Club on Arlington Avenue in South Central Los Angeles, I met the Brown Berets and Joe Cerda of the Great Boycott Campaign. That night at the Alibi Club, I learned firsthand of their struggles: poverty, police raids, subpar education, needed community resources in the Chicano community, and the programs the Berets had addressing those needs. I heard about the plight of the farm workers and their history-making Great Boycott, which my mom and my church were supporting. I saw what was possible with an organized popular campaign fueled by people power. It was my awakening. I quit college, went to work for the United Farm Workers, and was mentored by the Brown Berets. I saw the Black Panthers Serve the People programs, free breakfast programs for children, food and housing assistance, job training, and self-defense programs to protect the community. I learned that the Panthers had studied Chairman Mao's early writings on organizing, self-defense, and loving and serving the people. The Black Panthers changed this narrative. Their slogan, "By any means necessary," not only included self-defense, but serving the people, food, clothing, housing, healthcare. They were changing the narrative and then were targeted by Hoover's FBI for annihilation. Meanwhile, the Asian American Political Alliance and other off-campus groups were advancing an Asian American perspective and marching in solidarity with other communities. Our shared history as communities of color in the United States led to deep ties which continue to this day. I was proud to be Japanese American, an Asian woman, and a woman of color. In 1971, the Japanese American Community Services Asian Involvement Office, the first Asian Movement Center, opened its doors on the third floor of the Sun Building on Weller Street in Little Tokyo. Ray Tasaki of Asian American Hardcore and myself were the only paid staff at $100 a month. We collectivized our $100 salaries with other core volunteers and survived by forming living collectives and communes. Our programs were inspired by the Black Panthers' Serve the People principles, creating programs to meet the 5 basic needs: food, clothing, shelter, education, and health for the community. Our work was guided by principles of self-reliance, self-determination, and revolutionary social change. We wore maroon berets with red stars. The black and brown berets were already taken. As we were defining ourselves as Asian American, we defined our Asian American movement. We stood up to break our silence, to reclaim our history, to honor our people, to shatter boundaries of race, age, gender, class, to stand with communities struggling for justice, to embrace a spirit of internationalism. We marched to end the war in Vietnam, a war against Asian people. And by our presence, we took the struggle beyond slogans of bring our boys back home to include Asian lives matter. We marched in our community in the Nisei Week Parade under the banner of the Van Troy Anti-Imperialist Youth Brigade in formation in memory of Nguyen Van Troy, who gave his life to try to end the war. Simultaneously, on a balcony of the Sumitomo building, slipping by security to shower anti-war leaflets into the crowd below, in the spirit of Tai Bin, we marched. Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream where Black lives mattered, Muslim lives mattered, Asian lives mattered, the people mattered. And we dreamed, and we won justice and redress for our people imprisoned in American concentration camps during World War II. Malcolm X had a message to the grassroots. We share that message and the fighting spirit of the 60s and 70s in the memory of Sei Fuji, Medgar Evers, Cesar Chavez, John Lewis. From Greensboro to Charlottesville to El Paso, from Wounded Knee to Standing Rock, from Little Tokyo anti-eviction to anti-gentrification today, from concentration camps at Manzanar and Tule Lake to Adelante Detention Center. And for many, it began in Little Tokyo, the cultural soul of the Japanese American community. Let the spirit of the 60s and 70s continue to inspire us. All power to the people. So today, the spirit of the Asian American movement lives on. We saw it when the first wave of redevelopment in Little Tokyo hit in the 1970s. It was the voice of community and groups like the Little Tokyo People's Rights Organization that demanded the low-income housing and the cultural community centers that we have today. In the struggle for redress and reparations, grassroots organizations like the National Coalition for Redress and Reparations, based in Little Tokyo, fought for Issei and Nisei concentration camp survivors to have a national voice in testifying, lobbying, decision-making, and sharing victory when reparations was won. When 9/11 created hostility and racial profiling and threats of detention camps for Muslims, the JA community was among the first to stand up and support with rallies and vigils in Little Tokyo. With current threats of gentrification again endangering the historical legacy and heritage of Little Tokyo, the community is rallying to defend and save Little Tokyo. Threats of deportation, family separation, and even detention in JA prison sites from World War II are being protested by groups like Nikkei Progressives and Tsuru for Solidarity, who are also providing material support for migrant children seeking asylum for their families. The spirit of the Asian American movement has also shaped our community service organizations. The young activists who marched for justice and to end war also built the Serve the People programs from the ground up without funding. Services for our Issei seniors, Asian vets, women, youth on drugs, artists and musicians, all those fighting for our community. These programs were the foundation for many of our human service organizations today. For example, the Issei Pioneer Projects that served our senior citizens, the social services that volunteers worked on, the language assistance program, the health fairs, all of these efforts led to the foundation and the organizing of the Little Tokyo Service Center, which is one of our finest community-based organizations today. The spirit, okay, how has the spirit of community and activism helped Little Tokyo face the pandemic today? So I'd like to give you an example of 3 great programs. The first is Community Feeding Community, which was coordinated by the Little Tokyo Coordinating Council. Community Feeding Community was developed to provide free meals to the workers who had lost their jobs due to COVID-19. So CFC buys meals at restaurant market rates from a rotating list of about 63 small mom and pop restaurants in Little Tokyo and the Arts District. 500 meals are distributed each week. A donation of $15 helps out our restaurants and provides a free meal for those who lost their jobs. To date, 750 donors have raised money for over 6,000 free meals. Another program is Little Tokyo Eats. That's a program that was organized by Little Tokyo Service Center. But Little Tokyo Eats delivers meals at $3 for senior citizen shut-ins. They deliver these meals 3 times a week. Delicious ethnic meals are prepared by our Little Tokyo restaurants at market rates, subsidized by donations and a grant from the Cato Foundation. As of mid-July, week 15, over 4,600 meals have been served and 1,700 volunteer hours have been spent delivering these meals. Little Tokyo Service Center also has a food pantry for low-income residents. The third program is Terra Meals. This is an individual effort that was started by Steve and Patty Nagano for residents at the Teramachi apartments. 40 meals are delivered every Tuesday and Thursday for those sheltering in at Teramachi. And as of the end of July, almost 1,300 meals have been provided and over $13,000 has been given to 5 rotating Little Tokyo restaurants that are working with Teramachi. So this is just an example. These food programs cover workers who've lost their job because of COVID-19, senior citizens that are shut in and can't get out, and the residents that live in Little Tokyo. So go Little Tokyo. The spirit of serve the people and activism lives on. The pandemic, the Black Lives Matter protests beginning in May, have had a profound impact on Little Tokyo. The civil rights movement of the 50s and the Black liberation movement of the 60s and 70s inspired us. Today, we again see the Black Lives Movement providing leadership in the fight against racism and for social justice. Our lives have been turned around by the new normal of masks and social distancing to fight the coronavirus. But the killing of George Floyd, the protests, and the response of the administration has exposed another deadly virus deep in America's DNA. This virus of racism is being activated and nurtured by this divisive administration and is contaminating our country. I can't breathe. George Floyd's last words. 8 minutes and 46 seconds of agony. 46 years of life extinguished under the knee of a Minnesota policeman. The movement of the 60s and 70s witnessed systematic executions targeting Black movement leaders like Black Panthers, Fred Hampton, and George Jackson. Today, police killings are less discriminating or directed, but more widespread. Last year alone, almost 2,000 people were killed by police violence. There's a long and growing list of deaths by police targeting the Black community. We will call out some of their names. In those names, I included Vincent Chin, a Chinese American living in Detroit who was beaten to death by 2 out-of-work auto workers. They thought he was Japanese during a time when the auto industry was declining and Japanese imports were decreasing. What was their punishment? $3,000 fine and no jail time. I included Vincent Chin to remember that communities of color have a shared history and a shared need to fight for justice. And now, I invite my brother, Sylvester Rivers, to join us.
In this together, say their name. Breonna Taylor, 26, EMT, shot 8 times by police in her home, Louisville, Kentucky, March 2020. Laquan McDonald, 17, shot 16 times by Chicago police, October 2017. Ahmaud Arbery, 25, unarmed, jogger, shot by 2 white men, Georgia, February 2020. Castel Philando, 32, shot 5 times at traffic stop by St. Paul, Minnesota police, 2020. Kendra James, 21, mother of 2, shot by Portland, Oregon police, May 2003. Lima Abner, 31, Haitian American, assaulted, brutalized, sexually abused by 4 NYPD police, August 1997. I Can't Breathe, George Floyd, 46, killed by knee on neck by Minneapolis policemen, May 25, 2020. Vincent Chin, 27, beat to death by 2 unemployed white men, Detroit, Michigan, June 1982. Eric Garner, 27, died in police chokehold saying, I can't breathe, NYPD, 2014. Sandra Bland, 28, jailed after traffic stop, found hanging in a cell, Waller, Texas, July 2015. Michael Brown, 18, unarmed, shot 6 times by policemen, Ferguson, Missouri, 2014. Amadou Diallo, 23, Ghanaian immigrant, shot 19 times by NYPD, February 1999. Trayvon Martin, 17, unarmed, shot by white neighborhood watch volunteer, Florida, 2012. Tamir Rice, 12, shot to death carrying pellet gun, Cuyahoga County Police Department in Ohio, November 2014. Emmett Till, 14, accused of offending a white woman, beat, mutilated, shot, Mississippi, 1955. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., 39, assassinated by James Earl Ray, Memphis, Tennessee, April 1968. Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Sylvester. In closing, Japanese Americans, sorry, it gets me emotional. Japanese Americans won redress and reparations, and with that victory comes a special responsibility to remember our history and raise our voices against racism and injustice. I felt that quiet spirit in Little Tokyo during the Black Lives Matter protests. We'd like to close with Steve Nagano's video, a brief snapshot of Little Tokyo at the start of the protests, beginning with the National Guard presence in Little Tokyo, to the boarding up of storefronts, and to an unexpected conclusion. Here is Steve Nagano's Little Tokyo, Stand Up. You know, that video actually had a soundtrack and everything. So I'm sorry, you know, we're still struggling with technology. And Steve, I'm sorry, but it's still, I think the pictures show that in the aftermath of the protests and people considering, you know, what's at stake, the beautiful murals of unity that went up all over Little Tokyo just really says a lot. So I'd like to, you know, open it up for discussion, but before I just want to say thank you. I want to thank Jean-Marie Hantz from Metro for taking a chance on inviting me here to talk about the 60s and 70s and the impact on Little Tokyo. And thank you, Michael Cortez, for pulling this together. And really thank you, Christina Harrington, for, you know, working with all the technology and the slides and putting the pieces together. Also like to thank my brother, Sylvester Rivers, who's always there. He's my media partner. Thank you very much for the powerful reading that kind of made me cry. And I'd like to thank Abe Farrar at Visual Communications, who really helped put all these photos together. So thank you all. And usually this is a time for question and answers, but I thought it'd be nice to have also a discussion. I'd like to ask you guys out there, do you feel that the spirit of the 60s and 70s is still alive out there? And what can we do today? What can we do, big or small, to work for social justice, to fight racism, and to make a difference, even under this new normal, and even if we're sheltering in place? What kind of things are people doing? So I'd like to open it up, and also if you have questions.
Yeah, Miya, before we open it up for Q&A and discussions, I just want to thank you for taking the time to share your story with all of us and your perspectives. I think sometimes these conversations are not easy, and I think it's important histories to share if they were to be sitting with you in a room and you allowing us to have that conversation. So thank you. So, and I'll let Christina talk again about how we're going to be doing Q&A. Or I don't mind. So during the Q&A, we'll raise your hand. So I see there are some raised hands already, but if you would like to also ask a question, you can always email Christina at harringtonc@metro.net or text her at 213-326-1787. So I'm going to begin with unmuting. I see a raised hand from Sylvester. I'll go with Sylvester first. Sylvester, you're unmuted.
I'd like to thank Miya for this opportunity. We've been doing things for decades now. And I'd like to ask her, sorry to give us away, about after the killing of George Floyd, it seems like the momentum has changed also with the introduction of social media for people to learn things that we weren't learning before. So I would like to ask Miya, as far as the Asian community, how can we get more involvement, even in all communities, but specifically the Asian community, since this is about Little Tokyo, more involvement in the international struggle of liberation of people?
Well, I think that there are a lot of groups out there that have been very active in a lot of the protests. But I think for the sheltering in place, well, let me step back for a minute. You know, I remember when Trump was first elected, and there was that big women's demonstration because we were so angry about it. And there were a series of demonstrations after that. And we would be out there with our picket signs and our slogans. And one time I remember looking around and thinking, how come it's all of us old people? And we started, And we started thinking, we haven't been doing a good job of, passing the torch. But I don't know what happened in these last few years, because the young people have really been standing up. And with these protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, a lot of the older people have not been going out, but the younger Asian Pacific Islanders have been out there, with creating their own signs, and they're active in getting out the vote. And I've been really happy and impressed. And also, they really communicate a lot through social media. I mean, they get all these notices through what is that, Instagram or Twitter? Yeah, I need to learn from them.
Instagram and Twitter, yeah, all those new social media, which I think is changing the momentum, because before we just had what ABC, NBC, and CBS showed us, which was edited now and censored. Now they can't hide from what's happening. So people see this going globally, and I think that's brought out many more people. And hopefully our job, I think now as elders, is to teach, because a lot of the youth don't have the proper information. There's a lot of disinformation out there also,
yes,
which is disheartening. And I've seen it, and I've looked at it, and I try to tell them, okay, look, you can analyze it. We need critical thinking to delineate between the misinformation, which we know is out there from your experience and your activism back in the day. So it's still out there to a higher degree.
Yeah.
So each one teach one.
Great. We also have next Nancy Chang. Sorry, Nancy, if I pronounced your last name wrong. You're unmuted. Nancy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. Thank you to Miya and Sylvester for the presentation. It was really incredible. So I actually have a question. I'm a first-generation Chinese American woman in my 20s. And with everything going on, I was just wondering if you had any advice for me, because I feel like with recent events, I've become very cynical and disillusioned with how just the state of the world and how everything is. And I think I'm just more aware of my place as an Asian woman in America with all the rise of the anti-Asian hate crimes and racism. So how did both of you kind of push through that and continue to stay motivated to the point where you're still talking about it and still hopeful?
Do you have any friends or organizations that are involved?
I have a lot of friends that are, and we've have meetings to talk about these issues, but with the shelter in place, I feel like it's been harder for us to go out there and be part of, an in-person community.
Yeah, and that's why I threw out the question, what kinds of things can we do when we're sheltering in place? And one group that I think is providing a good example is a group called Nikkei Progressive. And they have happy hours. They have on Zoom. A lot of communication is being done on Zoom, and they have happy hours where we can talk about different issues, and they're taking up projects and working on other, like on the immigration issue. Right now, people are starting to talk about, as a Japanese American, since we worked so hard for Japanese American redress, we see new information or new activity coming forward on Black reparations. And so there are groups that are starting to get involved in that. And so I think that for our groups to maybe work in solidarity with other communities on specific issues, and not, and take something specific that works for you. My niece, I think she's online, Anna. I would like you to say something, but my niece is an artist, and there's I think she's been active with a group of women artists. So it's finding finding people that are close to your heart, that have your same interests, and yeah, working towards that.
Beautiful. If I just may add to what Miya said, I want to say three quick things. Number one, I tell people look like a hurricane or a tornado. Around that hurricane is chaos. Things are flying. It's crazy. But inside, in the eye of it, is calm. So you see yourself as that tornado or hurricane. Outside is craziness and madness, but you maintain your calm on the inside. As far as this pandemic, it's the best time for people to do study. We have to educate ourselves, to read, to look at other organizations. Miya introduced me to Yuri Kochiyama. I didn't know about Yuri Kochiyama until Miya told me about this fantastic young Asian woman who was at Malcolm X's side when he died. So what Miya said is actually absolutely correct. Find those people with like minds, maintain your calmness inside. Like when you're doing martial arts, you're not out of control, you maintain that calm. And then you strike, so do that. And then use this time to read. I've been doing a lot of studying, a lot of information I've been getting. It's crazy. So this is the time, this is the perfect time. This is 2020, which means perfect vision. We can see now. So take that and run with it.
Nancy, just wanted to add good points, both by Miya and Sylvester. Is last couple of weeks ago we had a conversation with Eugene Moy from Chinatown. I'd love to connect you with him. So my contact information was on that slide if you got it. If not, it's Cortez, CORTZMIC @metro.net. So it's CORTEZMIC @metro.net, and would love to connect you with even some of the Chinatown organizations through Eugene Moore resource.
And Nancy,
you.
I'd like to invite you to a Little Tokyo Historical Society meeting. And even though we're based in Little Tokyo, we really welcome new voices. And I can also give you information about Nikkei Progressives, which has a cross-section of activists in this area, just to begin with.
If you're a musician or artist, use your art or music to also tell stories.
Yes. Great. Chris, thank you, Nancy. Christina, do you want to go to the next folks? I think she still has challenges. We'll go with Tom Eggebine. I'm sorry, Tom. I tried my best. You are unmuted now, Tom.
Thank you. The last name is Eggebine, just like eggs and beans, okay?
Great.
It's a Dutch name.
Great.
A bit of a history question here. 1892. I'm sorry, what?
Oh, no, I was just going to say you're unmuted. We hear you.
Oh, okay. 1892, the Chinese Exclusion Act. And then, obviously, World War II, the internment camps, and so on and so forth. Then suddenly, somewhere along the line, and Miya, you mentioned this, and my thanks for your eloquence and the massive amount of data you offered. Then you mentioned about how Asian Americans had become the model minority, which I don't think was ever a compliment.
No.
But how in the world did that transition occur from the internment camps of the World War II, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1892, to now suddenly, I think it was to suddenly becoming a model minority?
Well, model minority is really an insult. And I think after the Japanese Americans were, released from camps, they were told not to congregate together. There were still a lot of restrictions. And our community, I think, believed that the United States could actually have committed genocide on, all the Japanese Americans. And so it really had a heavy impact on my community. And I know I'm third generation, and my parents and their generation, we had sayings like, well, the nail that sticks its head up, gets beat down, and they wanted us to blend in as Americans, and we started to be seen as a model minority, but we were really not. And as a model minority, we were used as a wedge against other communities of color, and there were many people that were resisting against that. So how did we get out of you're saying, how did we move out of that? I think, like I said, for me, I was really inspired by the movement of the 50s and 60s. And when we started seeing, African Americans fighting for their civil rights, we supported that. And when we saw people, reclaiming their history, reclaiming their identity, we supported that, and we grew into that, and we began to define ourselves as not Orientals, as not a model minority, but as Asian Americans, as people of color that have shared a history with, our Chinese sisters and brothers, and our Chicano and African American and Indian. So people of color have shared such a common history in this country, as you know.
Great. Thanks, Tom, for your question. I'm going to go next to Ed and Barbara. You are unmuted.
Okay. Hi, Miya.
Oh, my God.
Barbara from Wisconsin.
Yes, how are you?
Miya.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Sylvester, for a great presentation. Miya, we worked so many years together in the area of health equity and health disparities, and I'm so amazed right now not amazed, but kind of grateful that so many young physicians, men and women of color, who are pointing out the disparities in the pandemic within, our different communities of color throughout the United States. And I just wanted you to comment on that, given your experience in healthcare, like myself.
Well, I think it's because of people like you and other forward-looking people that we work with in the health area that this recognition is coming forward. Because when we were working at LA County, there was not any type of data that was kept on language, on country of origin, on cultural beliefs and health practices. And so we at the county, with the most, I think we were the second highest county in terms of patients of color, patients from other countries. And we didn't even keep that data. And it's because of people like you and others that fought for language assistance, that fought to have disaggregated data kept on our patients so we could know better, we could better provide health services. And we struggled for culturally competent methods of work and culturally competent health workers. And I think all that laid the groundwork for these great young medical workers that we have today.
Yeah. Right. No, I really agree. It's kind of gratifying that, sometimes we thought we were fighting the, lost cause, but it's gotten results today. People are realizing, and it's young providers are realizing.
Yes.
That's really the encouraging thing. So, yes, we're in a pandemic, but we've learned a lot. So thank you, and thank you again, Sylvester. It's good to see you. You look great.
Great. Thank you, Ed and Barbara. I don't see any other hands raised, but I do want to see if there's anyone else from the Little Tokyo community that want to provide. I see Bill.
I want to call on Bill.
or anyone else that may want to say anything about your community, this is a great opportunity. So, okay, I'm going to unmute Bill Watanabe. I think, okay, Bill, you're unmuted. Oh, Bill, did you want to say anything? Oh, he says no.
No?
Oh, I think he's looking to, no. Well, if there's anyone else from Little Tokyo community that would love to speak, if you have a few more minutes, that would be welcome.
I can't believe it. We're being so Asian.
Yeah, I see a comment from, I see Carlos Montes with his hand raised.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna unmute you, Carlos. Oh, okay. Sorry, for some reason, Carlos, it's not, let me see if it's working.
Carlos used to be the Minister of Defense for the Brown Berets.
Carlos, do you want to, I think you muted yourself. Do you want to unmute you? Okay, there you go. There you go.
Am I on?
Yes, you're on, Carlos.
Thank you very much for organizing this event, Miya. Awesome. We had a lot of good activism and solidarity in the 60s with the Asian community, the Black community, of course, the Chicano community, the Japanese American community was always been part of Boyle Heights. And just in closing, I mean, the struggle continues. You're right, a whole new generation. We're living in this COVID-19, this economic crisis, and with Trump, and we just got to keep, working together, all of us, and marching and organizing, working with a whole generation of 20 to 30-year-old folks that are into continue the organizing, and we're of course facing the high number of police killings in Boyle Heights and East LA. Mm-hmm. We had teenagers killed by LAPD in broad daylight, and but the solidarity, unity with the Asian community is always there, and good history. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just say, Carlos used to be, were you the Prime Minister of Education for the Brown Berets?
Well, technically Minister of Information.
Oh, information, okay.
Yeah, the only reason I think of that, I wasn't afraid to speak up at rallies, so they nominated me Minister of Information. That got me to get busted more often. I've been busted like 12 times because of that, But luckily for your support and the community support, I've always had community political campaigns to free political prisoners, and thank you very much for all your work, Miya. I love you. I love you.
Love you too.
Great. Well, thanks, Carlos. There's a few more. I know we're running down to the last few minutes. So I see Lyndon Nishinaga. You're unmuted. I think, here you go, Lyndon.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yes. Oh, okay, thank you. First of all, thank you, Miya, for the presentation. I was there with you in Washington, D.C. in 1987 for the Regis Reparation lobbying campaign in Washington, D.C. My wife and I were there, but unlike you and several others, I was not a leader. I was just a regular member. And so I was a member for like a good 10 years, starting with Little Tokyo People's Rights Organization, but I never was a leader in these groups like you are. So that's okay, as long as I was able to contribute. And I was working so hard on lobbying at that time that I didn't even get in that famous picture in front of the Capitol. Oh. I was working on another lobby. We lobbied six people, including Pete Wilson, then Senator Pete Wilson.
Oh, God.
And Duncan Hunter, of all persons, Duncan Sr. But I was going to ask, right now, Nancy Chen asked about, or you asked about what's going on with the Asian American community in Torrance. I don't know if you guys heard, but in Torrance, we've had some incidences of anti-Asian racism namely at Wilson Park. It's been in the newspapers. And before that, a year before that was at the Del Amo shopping mall. And so several of us are working on it as we speak right now. And so even though the focus is on Chinese, often they can't tell the difference between Chinese and Japanese or Korean. So this lady, and I like to just mention this, she happens to be Latin American. Her last name is Hernandez. Attacked on 3 occasions 3 Asian American people, 3 groups of Asian American people from last year to this year. And so Kent Kawai and others, and Kanji Sahara and others, myself, we were all working on trying to redress this. And so far we got the city council to pass a very good resolution that condemned that condemned this. It's a very good resolution. So whoever's interested, I could send you guys a copy. But the resolution is not enough, so we were looking for a little more a follow-up action besides that. So that's what's happening in Torrance, at least among the COVID-19 related anti-Asian American attacks. And the worst part of it is she's her last name is Hernandez. So I'll just leave that with you. The last thing I'd like to ask is your host, LA Metro host, Christine. Question to her, Christine Harrington. Is she still there? I guess, is she still not there? I guess not. Well,
she was having some technical difficulties.
I wanted to ask her the connection between the Japanese bullet train and the California high-speed rail project, because I happen to be a council member of from the very beginning of that project, a small business council member, and so I just wanted to ask her what she thought about the progress and the quality of that project so far.
Yeah, so Christina's having technical difficulties, but Lyndon, we're more than happy to connect you with folks who are working on those projects. If you email me, Cortez, CORTEZ, the first initials of my name, Michael, which is MIC @metro.net. So it's Cortez, MIC @metro.net.
Oh,
so,
good.
And then we're more than happy to continue that conversation, connect you with the folks.
Thank you very much. But
yeah,
I think this incident in Torrance is kind of a big issue, and I'd like you all to be up on it. And so
great.
Maybe we're going to need your help too.
Yeah, thanks, Lyndon. All right, that concludes. I know we're a little bit over time, but I want to thank you all. Thank you, Miya, for this conversation. This is just one of many conversations we're going to have next month. We're looking to have it in South LA, following by Boyle Heights, San Fernando Valley, and then South Bay, San Gabriel Valley. These conversations will change. It won't necessarily be around history or activism. It could be about business as well too. What are the small business community doing? So we hope you continue to be engaged in these community conversations as we move throughout the LA County region. So thank you again for joining and have a great day.
Thank you, Miya and Metro.
Thank you.